This SEC on CBS postgame report is presented by Belfour Restoring More Than Property. I am Hakeem Dermish. The last time Georgia lost a game, the 2021 SEC Championship, looking to avenge that and eventually repeat as national champs. And on this day, the Dogs had another successful day, beating LSU 50-30 in the SEC title game. Stetson Bennett avenging that loss from 1 year ago to Alabama. Had 3 touchdowns in that game, also threw 2 interceptions, including a pick 6. Wasn't the reason why they lost, but it was also not the reason why they didn't have a chance in that game. But he was the reason, one of the reasons at least, they won on this day. 4 first-half touchdowns from Stetson Bennett, tied for the most in an SEC title game, matching Mac Jones in 2020. As Stetson Bennett goes 23 of 29, 274 yards and 4 scores. And Georgia puts a 50-burger on the scoreboard as they beat LSU by 20. They cover the 17. Game goes well over the total of 51 in Atlanta. Much more reaction and coverage ahead here on CBS Sports HQ. We'll get back out to Atlanta with Gary Danielson, Brad Nessler, and our crew, Josh Pate, Barrett Sallee, Dennis Dodd. Right now, we send you to Atlanta for the trophy ceremony, where the Dogs. I'm not that bad at football either. I would say you're right about that kid. He's had a heck of a career, and man, he's still got 2 more games. Well, at least you think he's got 2 more games, right? We don't want to get hit ahead of ourselves here. 2 more wins, and they're national champs back to back. I mean, I'm not doubting him. You kidding me? The kid that was overlooked, walk on, put on a U.S. Postal hat to get some attention at showcases, and now he's leading Georgia back to the college football playoff. Look, this is incredible this season. 13-0, and they're going to be right back in Atlanta for the Peach Bowl in the college football playoff semis, right there at Mercedes-Benz Stadium. And that's where we find our crew, Josh Pate, Dennis Dodd, and Barrett Sallee.
Yeah, Mercedes-Benz Stadium has black and red confetti all over the place. Look, we're not that bad at talking, so how about we talk about this game? Dennis, 50-30, the margin of victories right around what that pregame spread said. Georgia covers, but overall thoughts, 50 hung here by Stetson Bennett and the Dogs today.
In a season where there were no good teams, what did we hear that time after time? Everybody's got flaws. This weekend, 2 teams dropped that were undefeated. Georgia's the standard. Yes. They're setting the standard. I don't care about the 30 points. I agree with you, Barrett. The defense was great. Coming into this game, generational defense, best in 20 years. Last year, 6 players taken off that unit. These guys are giving up 3 more yards per game on average. I don't know why we're playing the playoff at this point. I think we can grandfather it to Georgia. They're not pretty to look at all the time, but they've got the best team.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing to me is that the Keys went through Stetson Bennett again. 3 months ago, I was in this stadium watching the Keys be given to Stetson Bennett against Oregon, and he put up 50 on the Ducks as well. I think it's very still kind of fighting for his job. Even in the national championship game, there were calls for JT Daniels. From the moment he stepped foot in this stadium 3 months ago to the moment he leaves this stadium tonight, the offense has gone through him, and that speaks volumes of the trust Kirby has in him and the trust Todd Monken has in him, especially considering from a wide receiver standpoint, it's not like he's got a bunch of dudes out there.
Here's what's interesting. You just mentioned it because everyone forgets it. This time last year, they were getting beat here by Alabama. And no one remembers it because they won the national championship, but also as it relates to Stetson Bennett, no one remembers that we spent an entire month of December when you're with your family, Thanksgiving, and then Christmas Eve, the talk around the table was, Grace, amen, are we going to start JT Daniels in the semifinal?
Exactly.
Like, that was the talk around Georgia. I live here. I can tell you that's what the talk was. And then it was forgotten because they win the national championship. But in the same vein, I just talked to someone when we were coming out of the tunnel onto the field saying, man, this is getting old hat. Georgia does this every year. They don't. They just won it for the first time in 5 years. Yeah. So, I mean, there's a lot to be said for what the perception is versus what the reality is.
Spring of 2021, Stetson Bennett did not take a snap. I asked him during the season, do you remember if you took a snap? He said, maybe with the threes. I can't remember. Fast forward to now, and you're right about last year at this time, the JT Daniels drumbeat was loud and it was significant. Now he's a game changer instead of a game manager. I made the point in my column that this is Georgia's Nick Saban from 07 to 13 at Alabama. but I think Stetson's Bennett better than any of those guys that he had during that time. He's a difference maker.
Well, he is, and you look at the final score, the 30 points that were given up, and I don't care. People are going to look look at how many yards Georgia gave up to LSU, even though they had a backup. I don't care.
Right.
Nobody should care about that. You go back and look at that game from the moment toe met leather. Georgia absolutely dominated this game. The defense was a big reason why as well, and I think we talked about it pregame that they lost 15 players, 5 first-round starters off of that defense. It is a blessing in disguise, and we saw that. We saw Jalen Carter have a phenomenal day. We saw Christopher Smith, the old guy who has been around this team for a very long time, but hasn't really received the pub, had one of the smartest plays we'll ever see. So this Georgia team is in full-on Nick Saban mode. Just lather, rinse, repeat, and do it all again in the playoff.
So, Dennis, you just said overwhelming favorite. They'll obviously be the 1 seed. They'll obviously be a point spread favorite against everyone. But I can go ahead and tell you, I can go ahead and spoil it for you because someone's going to say it, so I'm going to say it for you. Someone out there trying to overthink the room is going to say, yeah, Georgia did win 50-30, but, and then they're going to lean in, they're going to whisper, LSU did outgain them. Misleading final. So, point being, we don't know how the playoff committee is going to shake out these rankings. The thinking amongst us, kind of just spitballing, is maybe it's Georgia TCU. But if it's not Georgia TCU, it's Georgia Ohio State. In all likelihood, they'd be favored either way. But they get to come right back to this building again where they've won, a combined 105-0, it feels like. So now as we set the stage for the playoff, who do you think gives
Georgia Ohio State? They beat Ohio State. Ohio State will, I don't want to say they'll turtle, but they'll eventually fold, frankly. And TCU has to outscore everybody. So I think that's the best game to eventually see, whether it's the semifinals or finals.
See, I think Ohio State's a tougher test. I think Ohio State, with what they're able to do, especially with a month to get their running back room healthy, I think that's the biggest thing. When Ohio State lost last weekend to Michigan, their running back room was essentially decimated. You give them a month to get healthy, they can run up and down the field. That's how Ohio State operates. Difference of styles. Styles make fights. I disagree with you with Michigan. I think Michigan and Georgia is the same team.
Right.
Georgia just has better players.
Right.
Ohio State's a different style. I think they could potentially stress this Georgia defense. So I think Ohio State, if you're Georgia, you really, really want the committee to look at TCU and be like, yeah, you lost yesterday. Ohio State lost to that team we're going to rank number 2 a week ago. We're going to go with them.
And I think you need go back only to this game last year. Alabama last year was a flawed team.
Yeah.
But they had the weapons out wide. They had the quarterback. And you found out what could happen against Georgia in a one-game setting. A whole season, maybe not, but in a one-game setting. As for LSU, they got to wear this loss tonight. I think that maybe it dampens some people for about 24 or 48 hours, but overall, signing day's coming up. They're going to land a top 5 class. Brian Kelly off to a phenomenal start. And now we look at Hugh Freeze coming in the door at Auburn, and we look at just a totally muddy picture moving forward in the SEC West until Alabama decides to be Alabama again.
They'll be fine. I thought Jaden Daniels was game for a half. He limped off the field like Caleb Williams. I mean, it looked like that last night. I think the biggest thing that happened for LSU tonight was they might have a quarterback. Garrett Nussmeier threw for 294. And I will preface that by saying after the first quarter, I thought this game was garbage time. I think it was 21-7 at that point. They didn't provide much hope. But against a ravenous defense, he did well. A couple of scores, 294, almost 300. And the SEC West just gets tougher. Brian Kelly is just getting started. You mentioned the recruiting class. It's going to be very, very good.
Not to mention what they can do in the portal.
Yeah.
Right. So it's going to be tough. Georgia's going to have a problem, but they may have a problem as repeat national champions, only the second in 28 years.
I think when you tell the story of the LSU Tigers, think about that opening game against Florida State where they lose on a blocked extra point with no time on the clock. And I think all of us were looking around going, oh, God, Brian Kelly is not cut out for this. And then you go fast forward about a month, and they're getting blown out by Tennessee at home. The sour taste in everybody's mouth after this game in purple and gold, it should not persist because, you lost by 20 to Georgia. Yeah, you lost to a bad Texas A&M team. The fact that LSU walked on this field in early December is a minor miracle for a team that, remember last year in the Texas Bowl, LSU was down like 20 scholarship players. They didn't even have a depth chart. They were just like, dude, you got a helmet? Go play center. You're good. Think about what that team has come through from that point to here. I don't care that they lost. It is a phenomenal season for
36
LSU.
scholarship players in that bowl game. 9 games into this season, they were 7-2, can see a path to the national championship. And I said at the time, I wrote, that's why Brian Kelly left Notre Dame. You're 7-2 at Notre Dame, you're out of it, no hope, at least in this configuration. But that's why you go to LSU. You beat Alabama with a rebuilding team, and now you've got hope. And not only hope, but access to some of the best players in the country while not using a full tank of gas.
Yeah.
Let's be honest. So I don't have to repeat that, but we know the future's bright.
Let's bring it back here to wrap it up. Our Belfort player of the game tonight. We could go a couple of different directions here. Dennis, I'll let you start. Where are you
I like
headed?
Christopher Smith.
Oh.
1 TFL, 1 interception, at least 1 PBU on the interception by Ismail Mandan. And 1 great interception, realized I can pick this ball up and return it 96 yards for a touchdown because he kind of squatted over it, thought about it. Am I Chris Davis? Is this the sneak six?
Can I do this?
Can I do this? Is this the sneak six? And he did. And that kind of kicked off the evening. LSU rebounded, tied the game, but that was it. I like Christopher Smith.
I'm going to go with, Stetson Bennett. Think about what he did here today. It was a 180-degree turnaround from the guy who really lost them the SEC championship game last year. Stetson Bennett deserves a ton of credit. He came out, and I think all season long, even toward down the stretch, it's like, okay, is Stetson really going to be a difference maker? What's going to be his deal? Can he really be a guy that can go out there and hang half 100 on a good team? Well, he just hung half 100 on a really good team. So Stetson Bennett for sure.
Glory, glory to Old Georgia. Good night for the Dogs here in Atlanta. It's becoming a familiar theme, and now they will not await their postseason fate, but they certainly will await their first-round opponent in the college football playoff. Hakeem.